Aloha mai kākau. Happy Aloha Friday. Welcome to Huewai Ola. My name is Kale Chang. It's my pleasure to be your host. Huewai Ola, again, is a webinar series brought to you by Ahakane and Kanaiokana, an opportunity for us to strengthen our ohana by uplifting and empowering our kane, our Hawaiian men. Huewai Ola means a gourd of living water, referring to man as a vessel of life, guided by the god Kane. In Hawaiian culture, gourds also represent knowledge. In this series, we introduce you to some extraordinary kane, cultural practitioners, scholars, leaders in our community. They'll share perspectives, practices, and advocacy in our lahui. Aloha nui to our viewers out there. Mahalo for joining us today. As we get started, please shoot us a quick aloha in our Zoom chat box or Facebook comments and let us know where you're joining us from. Also, leave comments or ask questions throughout the show, and we'll do our best to include you in our conversation. Oh, speaking of interaction, in our efforts to have a healer in every home, we have a brand new program called Ho'aho. This is a unique opportunity to take a deeper look into our healing methods, lomi lomi, la'au lapa'au, aipono. It's kind of like this show, He Huewai Ola, but it's much more intimate in small group settings. So if you're interested, we do have a couple of seats left. Please sign up by email info@ahakane.org. Mahalo nui. All right, welcome to episode 14 of He Huewai Ola, Pāuhi. Let's meet our guests for today. Our honored guest for this episode, I've known him for many years. You know, we've been fortunate enough to interview some brilliant Kanaka here on the show, many of whom are actively revitalizing our Hawaiian culture through their varied practices. And then when it comes to the practice of kākau uhi, or the art of Hawaiian tattooing, not only has this gentleman breathed new life into a once potentially lost tradition, he also works very diligently to rebuild and reinstall the ceremony and protocol necessary to honor this sacred practice. He's here with two of his haumana, Kamaliʻi Hanohano, a mo'okane of Pāuhi, and Keliʻi Makua, who recently received the title of Kahuna Kāuhi. Please help me welcome to our show, ladies and gentlemen, Kahuna Kāuhi, Suluape Keone Nunes. Aloha mai kākou. Oh, sorry. Can you guys hear me? Gotta unmute. Yeah.
Ai, aloha mai.
Hey.
Pe mai ni oi.
Mai ka ino. Lohi ka manawa iki a oi.
Mahalo.
Thank you for joining us today. Keone, really quickly before we get into our topic, I find it interesting that many of our kumu practitioners, loya, that we've had on the show, most of them have not been doing what they're most known for. They haven't been doing it all their lives. Could you share a little background on yourself, your life before kākau uhi?
Oh,
like
yeah.
where you grew up and the things you were doing up to then.
Ai mahalo ia. I grew up in Waianae, in the Waianae coast. I actually grew up on Hakimo Road, infamous as it might be sometimes, but you know, I grew up over there, and I attended Waianae Elementary, Intermediate, and High School, and I graduated in 1975. So that'll give you some indication of how old I am. My journey over here was kind of not in a straight line. I was very honored when I was younger to sit at the foot of kupuna. And we would talk story well into the night when my friends were out playing cards or going to nightclubs and stuff. I was spending time with kupuna. Because I thought that their stories were fascinating. You know, to hear somebody talk about how Lili'uokalani walked, how she smelled, how she spoke, to me it was just amazing. And so I would just spend a lot of time with kupuna. They would share with me a multitude of things, including hula, including lua. I spoke with Homer Hayes at length, and he was an amazing gentleman. I spoke with Theodore Kelsey on language and all these other things. Yeah. And there were 5 particular kupuna that shared with me a multitude of things that included uhi, Antimiro, Lupinui, Uncle Kalahiki Ola, Nali Elua. We had Auntie Emma Freeze, Auntie Martha Lamho, and one of the most unknown one was Paul Cathcart. And they shared with me a multitude of things. And part of what they shared with me was uhi, was about tattooing. And at first, as I've said many times, I thought that it was common knowledge. But as I grew older, I found out that not very many people knew about those traditions. And I was encouraged to start looking at tattooing and doing the work. And at first, I never thought about it. I was in my early 30s when I started tattooing in 1990. And, that's what led me here. And the one thing that I did do that might be different is that I never strayed, in a sense. I never did other types of tattooing. I never did, lettering or anything of that nature, because that wasn't my purpose. My purpose was to try and stick as close to the tradition as I could. There was only one time that I really did another one, and it was because and that was a friend of Keliʻi, Makua's. He kept coming to me, I think about 3 years in a row, to try and fix his Japanese tattoo. And I finally did that, but that was the only thing that I did that was outside of it. So, fortunately, I've had some good people to sit with me. Keliʻi Makua gained the title of Keone Ula Makauhi first, and Kamaliʻi Kupono Hanohano also received the title of Keone Ula Kapo Panapano. Just to clarify, that Keone Ula has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the sacred sands of Samoa, where Taima and Tila Whainga gave the tool to my teacher's family, Su'a Suluapi Paulo. And it was on those sands that those names are honoring. So both of them are titled, both of them have uniki, and both of them are carrying on.
All right, thank you for sharing some of the background story. Keliʻi, a quick question for you. As we start digging into this cultural practice, quite often things that are innately Hawaiian can't easily be translated into a single English term or single word. Like, for instance, we've interviewed Mahi'ai, who actually take offense when people call them farmers, because they say what they do and who they are is so far from the Western concept of what a farmer is. I imagine you guys go through that same thing. So Keliʻi, could you answer, what do you say to people when they call you an artist or a tattooist? What would be your response to that?
I just tell them that I'm not an artist. I've been taught that our patterns belong in a certain way. They're used in specific ways, and we're bound by that tradition. And so through ancestral tradition, we have to do things a certain way. So we're not at liberty to make all kinds of fancy things or make big changes. Through our kumu, our master's teachings and knowledge, he has shown us ways that we might be able to make a slight change here or there, depending on the individual, especially if the pilina is thin. If there's a pattern that carries a heavy couple, you can't just fish that out to somebody if they cannot carry it. But they don't have that Kalinga to it. So in that sense, honestly, I don't feel like I'm an artist. I don't feel I'm even a practitioner or a tattooist. I feel that I am trying to emulate my master and his teachings of ancestral wisdom and ancestral tradition. So really, I'm bound by a lot of rules within within our culture. It might help if I was a better artist and have a better visual eye for detail in the sense of what something might look more pleasing to the eye. One thing that I'm really amazed that the outside doesn't place value on some of our patterning or placement if it doesn't have a flashy look to it.
Right.
And I had no idea of any of this when I was young, and every morsel of my knowledge comes from our master, and so really I don't have nothing to compare it to, other than what you would see from the shops. And we've been shown time and time again how certain patterns don't belong with other patterns because of the conflict wherein that pattern might derive, the conflict of what that pattern might speak of. There's really a lot that goes into it. Your head has to be in a really, really level space.
Yeah.
And if I can just interject, the thought of that word artist is a Western concept. Within a traditional concept, whatever you do, regardless of what it is, you have to be meal. You have to take it to the best level that you can, and you have to be look at it and make it as neat as possible, and try and not only look at the aesthetics but the meanings behind it. So within artistry, you can do that at one level, but you're doing it more as on a individualized level. But for practitioners, you're doing it on a community level, on a cultural level, and so it's really different. So it's kind of difficult to put a Western concept into a traditional mindset. So, I appreciate the question, and that's always been asked of me and both of these guys. And one of the things about Keone Ola Ho'oponopono is that he has a very artistic eye also, and so it's kind of interesting to see his compositions and everything as it takes a new form, which I really, really appreciate also.
Nice. Yeah, so one of the main things I'd like to share with our Hawaiian community is we can't treat this sacred practice like we would a tattoo shop, right? That means sometimes we find ourselves asking the wrong questions and approaching this art or this practice in the wrong way. So we want to talk today about the past, present, and future of this cultural practice. Keone, you mentioned a little earlier. Can we go back to that in a little more detail? Whatever you're willing to share with us. Can you talk about the genealogy of your tools?
Yeah, I was very fortunate in 1996. Well, let me back up a little bit. Probably between 1992 and 94, somewhere around there. There was this gentleman from Holland that came over to Hawaii, and he was doing a documentary on tattooing around the world. His name is Hank Schiffmacher. He was known popularly in the tattoo world as Hanky Panky, and he was a really well-known tattooist, but that wasn't from my, I didn't go into that circles. And so I wasn't aware of that. And so he came down and he filmed a short piece on me. And he was very, very supportive of, at that time I was working with machine. He was very supportive. He told me something that didn't mean anything at that point to me because I didn't know who this guy was. And he said that I pulled the straightest line that he's seen with a machine. And I just told him thank you. And it didn't really impact me as much as after I found out who he was. He actually interviewed me, and Keliʻi was over there at that time. He told me of this tattooist that he considered the greatest traditional tattooist in the world. His name was Suluape Paulo, and that he was going to see him later on down the road. And when he saw him, he spoke to Suluape Paulo about what I was trying to do. And in 1996, I was given a call. Earlier in '96, we had gone down to Samoa, and we saw his brother. And it was eye-opening for us. Later on that year, he calls me, and he said that that Hank had talked to him about me. He invited me down to Samoa, and at first I was kind of hesitant because I didn't have a proper job, as they say. I was doing a lot of volunteer work, and he said, "Don't worry about it. We'll see that you can get your air ticket and everything. The only thing is you have to meet me in Aotearoa first," because he lived in Aotearoa. So I went over there. I spent a couple days with him, and we spent a week in Samoa. And it was at that time that he taught me how to do. And at first, I was obsessed with trying to make a tool. Then I showed it to him the next day. I didn't sleep pretty much all night. The next day I showed it to him. I waited outside of his hotel room, and I showed it to him. And he said, "Oh, this is pretty good." And he put it in his rack. And I was like, "Oh, okay." I didn't think that much of it at that time. Then he gave me materials to make another one. He said, "Good, make another one." Then he actually, I worked on it. Then the next day I showed it to him. And he told me, "This is really good. The only problem, there is one problem, is that they do not have anybody to use it. You mind if I teach you?" And that's how it started. And from being a student of his and having other people like Tamati Hunt come up and because, you know, one thing I noticed is that my learning style and my teaching style is antiquated. I am the kind of teacher that, you know, watch what I do, you know, and replicate that. And no need talk. And so I realized with these guys, their learning styles are different. It's evolved a little bit. And so Tamati Hunt came up and he kind of fine-tuned the learning process so that what I was doing was transferable to people like Keliʻi and guys. And so with his help, because he was doing some of Paulo's tools also, with his help, we're able to do this. In 1998, Paulo came down and spent several months in Hawaii. Oh, too much Ava. Yeah, he came down to Hawaii, and we had a ceremony in Nanakuli where he gave me a set of tools. And with that set of tools, he told me that the tools were now my responsibility for the people of Hawaii. And that's how that lineage started with me and the tools. Unfortunately, he died in 1999. in the year 2000, the family got together and called me and said that they wanted to give me his name as a title. And at first I was hesitant because I know what it is to be titled. It's not just, oh yeah, I have a title and that's it. There's a lot of responsibilities behind that. And so when they started talking to me more and more, I decided that I would do that. So in 2000, I was taken to Falise'ela in Whangasa in independent Samoa. And in front of the village, I was one of 5 that was given the name in a Saufa in ceremony, given the name of Suluwake. And that's why those who come from me, who are still with me, who I puka, who I graduate, will always have that lineage behind them. So I think that it's a good way of honoring our relatives in Samoa, but understanding that there is a huge responsibility to that on our side.
Mahalo. This is for Keliʻi, and then I'll get to Kamaliʻi as well. Keliʻi, you've been studying for almost 30 years with Keone. Can you share a little bit of that journey and how this has maybe changed your perspective or your outlook on things to think in a more Hawaiian way? We can start mentioning a little bit of the formalities of protocol and ceremony, if you'd like. Anything you'd like to share about your journey?
You know, honestly, Colin, my journey has been also not a straight path. Up, down, backwards, forward, over humps, so under tree limbs. I started out as a student of hula under Ku, and just by being around, I was lucky enough to be pulled in to assist him in his journey while he reawoken this tradition, and he's been patient with me forever in a life, and I have nothing but respect and gratitude for him. My backstory: my family moved to the continent. I graduated from high school in the continent, all of that, schooling, everything. I came home fresh, and I knew nothing. I knew a little bit of the language because my mom is Manaleo, but really I didn't have a lot. I knew bits and pieces, some pieces were in depth of my genealogy, but I really didn't understand who these people were. And it was through talking and working with Kumu that we helped to bring light to certain things about what we did, where we were from, who married who, and how they married somebody else, and then these kids came back together and married each other. You name it. And so for me, it was a huge learning of the backstory of my family, so that I can hopefully learn to become Hawaiian. My mom's brother gave me 5 names, said these 5 people were family, and he said this is family from this side, that side, you name it. And Kumu was one of them. And he said, go petition, ask, and hopefully they'll receive you as a student. And I was lucky that Kumu took me in. Incidentally, he was the youngest of the Kumu. To be honest, he is the only one left. You know, it's been interesting knowing that I have a blood connection. He's an elder for me within my family. He's been a big brother, not too far behind him in age. He's been so many different levels, even a father figure. Learning protocols is always been huge for Kumu, and trying to instill that in us. And I can honestly say, not always have I been open to hearing it, or maybe I missed it because I wasn't paying attention. You name it. Mm-hmm. I had cancer when I was young, so I wanted to start a family early because I didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring for me. So working, planning, raising family, I had my speed bumps, honestly. And protocol is one of the most majorest, importantest kind of things that we need and we should have. And I can tell you, I'm still lacking. I'm still learning. My kumu has great patience in that. And I hope, that one day I can really honestly look back and be proud of what I've done for him and his legacy, or for our people in general. Still trying.
Mahalo, Keliʻi. So, Kamaliʻi, can we talk about something special happened last November for all of you? And I know certain details are reserved for those who participated on that day. But could you share a little bit about what happened that day?
Sure. Well, first, aloha mai.
Aloha.
The end of last year, I guess, was a culmination of a lot of different things that took place in the history of being a student of Keone. It was the second uniki that Keone has performed. Keliʻi being the first, followed by myself, and, 3 other gentlemen that were titled as small kane. So kind of difficult to think about where to start, but really it was another step in the journey, because we just serve as a median between the past and the future. At the end of this all, we're all, I'm gonna pass, we're all gonna pass, and it just meant to solidify further relationship, the genealogy, and the responsibility and the privilege that we need to uphold in order to perpetuate this practice in its integrity.
Right on, thank you. Keone, as part of reviving something that you didn't have much resources for, what kind of challenges did you go through to bring this craft back to life?
The biggest challenge was educating our own people. There were several things that were blatantly wrong. One is that it hurts a lot more than machine. 2, it takes a lot longer. And the third one is a little bit different. It's that people don't understand the process. And so it's not like when you go into a tattoo shop and you tell them what they want. It's up to the practitioner to choose the designs for you. You would never go to a doctor and say, "Doctor, I have cancer. Give me medicine for that." The doctor is going to look at you and say, "Well, you don't know if you have cancer." Say, "No, I have cancer, so you got to give me medicine." No, it's a different world in traditional ways. In the right hands, the tools are less painful, a lot quicker, and you have to trust the process. And when I say trust the process, it's not just the process for the individuals getting tattooed. It's a process for these guys to learn, because there is a process. And if you trust that process, then you come out really much more knowledgeable in a better place than you were when you started. So that was the biggest challenge, is our own people, trying to get them away from zip codes on their backs, names on the back of their arms, and look at what we have as being important, as being relevant to our livelihood and to our existence. Yeah? And so that was a hard thing. I remember when I first started, there were so many people that said, oh, I would never ever get tattoos. I would never get a Hawaiian tattoo like that because I could never get a job. When I got my ala niho, when I first got my ala niho in 1990, that's what people was telling me. They were saying, you know what, you're never going to be able to work again. And right. I kind of questioned that. And I've worked since then nonstop all the way till now, you know, on with federal jobs, with all kinds of things. So it's not so much that this will prevent you from getting anything. We have to change the mindset. It's still there. We have to change the mindset of people to look at it in a positive way. There's certain airlines out there that carry a nomenclature that would you would think would be more open to it because it calls Hawaii its home. But for everyone in public, they cannot have something like this showing, which I don't understand. You know, it's because of a Western mindset that's being placed on. And so I think that we still have a lot more to educate, not only our people, but everyone else that we come in contact with. And I think that's important, that's ongoing. That the reason why I agreed to do this is not because I want to put my name out there, or I can probably speak the same for both Keliʻi and Kamaliʻi. It's not about putting ourselves out there. It's about educating people to realize that this is much more than just a tattoo. Yeah, you can go anywhere for just a tattoo. You can go anywhere in the world. You know that thick line that they do on Maori tattoos now, that thick border that you see on a lot of Maori tattoos and a lot of quote-unquote tribal tattoos or Polynesian-esque tattoos. That was started in Holland. And the guy that started it was Hank Schiffmacher, Hanky Panky. He's the first one that outlined the edges real solid black and doing that kind of stuff. And so you can go anywhere in the world and get a Polynesian tattoo, Polynesian, quote unquote. But what we're trying to promote and to perpetuate is something beyond. And hopefully the road is a little bit easier than it was when I first started.
Mahalo. So Kamaliʻi and Keliʻi, let's take a moment and enjoy this talk story a little bit about just the beauty of the experience of kākau. I think one of the fascinating things about it is, for people who don't know, there's usually somebody that's stretching skin, but the person who's actually performing the kākau is not really touching the person directly, but in a way, during this experience, you really become one with that person, and you can tell a lot of things throughout that process. Yeah, Keliʻi?
Absolutely. You know, watching Kumu work, he'll do stuff. You know, when you first did the tool, the mole in the pa'u, and you start applying it, that ink will just make a big blot on the skin. I can't see where he's going. I'm stretching and he's just doing it. And he's not going out. He's not going in areas he's not supposed to. Like perfectly, he knows where to go. And I'm over here just concentrating, stretching. And when it's time for me to wipe, it's perfect. And I'm amazed every time. I was always amazed, like, wow, your insight on where to be, whatnot. You'd always say, trust in your tools. Seeing Kumu do things that even if the angle was off and there was really no easy way to get that right angle, you would get it done like that. That makes you think that he doesn't have bones or he's got joints that can articulate all different directions. You know, so it was amazing to see, and he always knew how to do something, and he always knew how to or how to address something. And so honestly, that was always amazing for me to behold that. watching him not even touch the body, but mark the body. That was something. I've seen him put his hand on his own leg, holding the tool, and the tool was on top of the person doing the work. And usually you see a machinist, whatnot, they're right on top of the person, and that's their stability. And here is, you have the tool that moves in your hand, you move, and your hand is on yourself. And then the third thing is the person could move, or me being the stretcher could move the person accidentally. That's 4 different moves, and Kumu just right through. It's amazing. It really is amazing. It's it makes me wonder of the brilliance that our people had in the old days, to be able to bring it to a point where genetic memory, to me, that's genetic memory, that Kumu can do something at a part of his life where he's never done it before, but his body instinctually knows how to do it. It's amazing to watch. It really is.
You never talk.
Sorry, man. I just
a little difficult to talk just because, you know, for us when we sit with Keone, it's always, I hope that my words only echo his mana'o. So it's always better to hear him talk over myself. The experience, I guess, there's a lot to say about it, but I guess my first time experiencing was as a recipient of Pāuhi. I received my Alamiho. And since that time, you know, responsibilities have been added as trust is built, and it's kind of led myself and I guess the rest of us where we are today. But that being said, there's always something to learn despite where you are in the room. So it's a test of patience, really. As a recipient, you feel one thing. As someone that may just be a kākau, someone to just observe what's happening, you know, you experience one thing. So there's always a lesson involved. I'm hoping that I'm echoing what Tony would say, but the most important person really within this experience is the person laying on the mat. And because without them, although oftentimes people come out extremely grateful, you know, if these patterns weren't worn by someone, in essence, this practice wouldn't be here today. So it's a practice of patience and I would even say discernment, being able to follow a path that is extremely narrow and to be careful on the steps that we take in order to perpetuate this. I think that we're starting to attain a level of mayao, but oftentimes that word is thrown around that kind of seems to lose a little bit of weight. And you know, nowadays we're looking for instant gratification,
right?
Be it Instagram or you know whatever the situation is. We have a scheduled time that we're in school 4 years, and then you receive a diploma or whatever it may be. And really, all of our practices are a test of patience and discernment to be able to sit and to think and to build relationship with every single part of it, be it the tools or the individual or the skin. And so I think if we start to believe that we've reached that level of mayao, and that is when the demise or even the plateau of the practice can happen. Any practice, I venture to say. So it's constantly trying to push ourselves to reach a new level every single time, every day. And yeah, I want it.
You know, the thing that I've always taught these guys is to listen to your tools. Your tools will teach you. And in order for that to happen, you have to make your tools, as Kamaliʻi was saying, really mayao. Because if they kapulu, they're going to act kapulu. Yeah? And they're going to make your work kapulu. And they are awakened every time before we do tattoos. And a lot of times when they're awakened, you can feel that you're one with that tool. And through the tools, you can feel how the individual that you're working on is feeling. I can feel if they're having a hard time. I can feel if they're holding their breath. I can feel if they're relaxed. Yeah. One thing that Paulo told me is that sometimes through the tattooing, people go on their own journey, but sometimes they get sucked into the journey really, really far. So there was one individual that I was tattooing, and Keliʻi was there, I believe, and they were having a hard time in the beginning part. So I did a little pule for them, asking their ancestors to come and help this person. We started tattooing again, and this person just went to another place. Just before I ended, and you actually know this person too, but I'm not going to tell you who it is. Before it ended, I felt the person's skin, and I realized that his spirit had gone way into that different level. Paulo said, when that happens, you have to call it back. You have to change your tapping. You have to make it melodic. And so that's what I did. I started tapping differently, and I made it more melodic. And all of a sudden, he started waking up. When he woke up, he said, you know, I saw my aunt who had passed away, and she took me somewhere. And it was a beautiful place. And we were talking. Then all of a sudden, he heard this music. And his aunt told him, it's time for you to go back. And he told his aunt, no, I don't want to. But no, follow the music. And that's what he told me after he came out of it. And so you need to have that understanding of those possibilities as a practitioner to know what to do. So it's much more than just getting designs on you. It's a connection that you feel with your ancestors, because in 150 years or so, those ancestors back then, your ancestors, laid there and felt the same thing. And there's a powerful, powerful connection to that. And that's really important for the individual. And we just facilitate that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think what makes Kākauhi unique and very special is, of course, the ceremony and protocol part of it, the formal parts of it. We're in a much better place than we were 20 years ago, but I think in general, I guess what I want to ask is for people who are more sensitive to our culture now, and people in our Hawaiian community that in their na'au, they would like to be a recipient of such work. What are things that they can think about before even contacting anyone? Because when you think of hula, yeah, there's certain things you got to do before you try and join a halau or any other, if you want to get involved in ho'oponopono, you know, there's some preparation that you would have to do before even approaching a kumu. But people think they can just make an appointment for a tattoo, you know, when really they got to start thinking in those terms for this cultural practice as well. Are there some suggestions or advice you can give to people who might be ready to think about that journey?
It's like here.
It's a test. No, I think, so in the past, when people have reached out, sometimes, I mean, truthfully, I think due to my own ignorance, it used to bother me when someone would just, be it message or call and say, yeah, availability, you know. And but over the years of being with Keone and watching Keone navigate difficult situations, his wife will liken him to water, in that there's always a coolness to Keone, to our teacher. And so I think for us, it's always coming with that understanding that everyone is at their own level of understanding what this practice is about, or even any cultural practice. And it would be ho'ohano to make someone feel as if their lack of understanding was wrong. So that was the whole point of kind of our move to social media, although it has quite a bit of downsides. The idea was to create a platform, you know, I guess similar to what's happening now, is for those to be able to see the work, to maybe read a little bit. So hopefully, you know, through that, they can be able to come to a point of feeling ready and having at least a foundational understanding as to the marks and the responsibility that it takes to wear puhi. Some people, this is their first time looking into the genealogy, and that's okay. You know, we all start somewhere, and I think oftentimes Hawaiians in particular fall victim to, I don't know if it's an ego thing, but maybe making each other feel as if someone is less Hawaiian than they are. And that can be extremely dangerous, I think, for us as a people to move forward. So going back to your original question, it's really just about preparedness and willingness to be patient and to learn and to be willing to reestablish some of those connections that may have not been awake for a few generations, you know, due to many things, and colonization being one of them.
Take the rest.
That was really wonderful. You know, there's always something that could be said to add here or there, but honestly, what Kamaliʻi has placed out there is huge. People need to ingest that and know why they're coming. What's the reason? It's not because you're Hawaiian and you hunt and you fish and you rug it. It's not real. Over and over again, people would approach Kumu with that. And so he would speak Hawaiian to them, and they would look at them and like, oh, it's like, okay, that's Hawaiian, but you only hunted fish. You know what? People in Africa hunted fish, or Europe hunted fish. What differentiates you from those folks? Because you hunted fish and you call yourself Kanaka. So as a Kanaka, we need to know what this means to us and how we could step forward representing not only ourselves, our ohana, but all Kanaka in general. That's major. People don't realize that. And some come seeking, thinking that because maybe we've been called something of wonder in the past, maybe this goes into protocol. Like Kumu had said, we were doctors, you know, they were specialists, priests of Kane, if you will. And by no means am I that. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to emulate. But people will hear these things and come forward and say, oh yeah, you know, I want to do this thing because it's spiritual and I'm on a spiritual journey. People on a spiritual journey do not step forward saying they're on a spiritual journey. That's just like fucking lying. That's right. Not real. It's the silent ones that are in deep observation, in deep concentration, in these things that they bring and encompass, things that they pull out the minute detail. Earlier, Kumu said to be meal and to be ready for anything that comes your way is part of encompassing what I believe people need to be aware of when they step into this space. You know, they say, oh, I want this Makua pattern. Okay, what is that pattern to you? Who is this person to you? What is the name? How do you malama that? Do you know how? Kumus taught us not to put Omakua patterns on people if they don't know how to malama that. And here's a great one. So for me, I knew that we have all these different Omakua within our family, but I didn't realize not everybody was owner of that Omakua. It was the couple within the family would malama and take care of the rest of the folks in the family. So if this is my elder and he's taking care of that, doesn't give me the right to malama that also, unless he teaches me and gives me that information that becomes my responsibility towards that uhane and towards our ohana. You know what I mean? That's huge.
Right.
People don't understand that, and they step forward with the perception that they're entitled, and that's grossly wrong.
Yeah.
And having, like Kamaliʻi had mentioned, discernment, and that's a funny one that us three will laugh about. My wife is, bless her heart, has taught me this word over and over again. Discernment in the way we do things, what we or how we do, what we speak on, whatnot. And she just dip her head and give me the eye and say, "Hey, what was that word again?" Oh, yeah, you're right. Because there's so much that you can't just give if they're not ready to receive. If they're in that space to receive, then you feel it. And that's something that Kumu is really large on, and oftentimes I forget that.
You know, one thing that is important to understand, as Kamaliʻi has said, is that everybody is at a different stage of learning, in a different path. So
Right.
if they're beginning their stage, you don't give them a design that carries a lot of heavy kuleana. You give them something that is important for them to help them on their path of their own learning, even within their family. And the thing is, and that's important to understand. I've had many people in the past come to me and said, "Oh, I'm descendant of Kamehameha. I want a tattoo." I said, "Why?" "Because I'm a descendant of Kamehameha. I deserve a tattoo." And I said, well, "You know how many descendants of Kamehameha there are? There are literally thousands. What makes you deserve that right to wear a pattern that would indicate that you come from that line?" And oftentimes they can't answer. And so they'll go out to a shop and get it done. And I've seen that happen over and over again. One thing that I think is really important to also understand is when you prepare yourself to get work done, make sure that you know exactly what you're in for. That it's not going to happen the next day, or the next week possibly, or 2 weeks from now, or all of that. It's not going to happen until we decide that you're ready. And that's important because people want instant gratification. That's not necessarily going to happen, because if we tell you that you got to work on certain things, then go ahead and work on it. If you give us a genealogy that is really heavy, and that's happened, but you don't know nothing about it, then you got to find out about it, because you carry that kuleana. As one of the things that people, as Keliʻi had alluded to, have said, "Oh, I want an Aumakua pattern." And my first question is, well, who is the Aumakua? And they said, "Oh, a shark, or pueo, or turtle." Turtle is
Right.
used to be real low, now it's real high. Anyway, as requests. But I said, that's not my question. I didn't ask you what your Aumakua was. I asked you who your Aumakua is. Do you belong to Kua? Do you belong to Kahupa'au? Do you belong to Kohaimoana? Who is your Aumakua? And then they get stuck. And he said, "Oh, just put on anything." I said, "No, you cannot put on anything. You gotta find in your family who is the person that is malamaing that Makua. And if you wear those designs, will you take on that responsibility to take over that kahuship for your Makua?
Right.
And then people get they have a different tone after that. So, you know, there's a lot to prepare. I mean, more than we can share at this time.
Yes, of course. We're right at about 3 o'clock, but I want to go another 15 minutes if you guys are okay with that, because this is a really great conversation. Keone, I know a real Hawaiian way of thinking is that we're forever students, right? So you are continuing to travel, continuing to meet other indigenous artists. Can you tell me a story about a place called Buskalan Kalinga and who you met there? I would love to hear this story.
I've traveled to Buskalan twice, and that's in the northern part of Luzon in the Philippines. And my reason for going there the first time was I read an interview, and in that interview, this tattooist, whose age at that time was probably late 90s, late 80s, mid 90s, somewhere around there. In that interview, they asked if she was teaching anyone. And she said, I'm teaching my great-grandniece, but I don't know how much time I have left. And so it might be that I would be the last person tattooing on these mountains. And I had spent enough time with kupuna to understand that their worldview is very small in a sense. Their worldview is their village and maybe a little bit further out. I've talked to kupuna from Keone that thought that Wailuku was a foreign place to them that they didn't know. So I understood that concept. And so what I wanted to do, all I wanted to do was go over there and show her that there were other cultures that tattooed similar to what she did. So went up there. It took us 4 days, that first trip. It took us 4 days to reach Buskalan. 3 days, and it's not, I'm not going to say, oh, we had to ride on horse, and no. It was 4 days on a car. So it was really far. But actually it was 3 days on a car. We went to Buknai, which is right below Buskalan. We overnight over there, and we went up to the mountain. They dropped us off where the road ended and walked in. Walked in for about 3 miles. The first 2 miles was easy, and we're at altitude now. The first 2 miles was easy. It was straight, or it was going down. In the middle of going down, I was thinking, wait a minute, if we're going down, we gotta go up. So on the other side of the valley was all these steps going up to Buskalan. And you know, this Waianae boy that lived at sea level, going at altitude, going like 10 steps and getting out of breath, needing 5 minutes to catch my breath, and going 10 more to this place that had about 300 or 400 steps. It took a while. But you know what was the most amazing thing? Is as I was resting, you see kupuna going up and down with stacks of sticks and stuff like that on their heads and carrying rice. And you just feel like, oh my goodness, I am so terrible at this. Finally went up to meet her, and we stayed at her house. And a lot of people have heard of Wango, and some people have seen her. A lot of people don't realize her humor, her rascalness, and her life that's in her. So we went up there, and I told her, we said why we was here, And so one of the person who took us up there, her name is Iken, she volunteered to get tattooed. So I tattooed her in front of Wangod. And after that, Wangod looked at me and said, "You're really quick. Why do people come up to me to get tattooed? They should go to you." And I said, "No, it's because you're the master. I'm still learning." And we became very, very close at that time. We only spent one day. We had to leave. And before we left, she did a ceremony to see if I was going to come back. There was killing a pig and reading the intestines and all that. And she looked at me and she smiled and she said, "You're going to come back." And I was thinking, oh, I don't know about that. But when we left, it was really, really sad. When I went back about 3 years ago, she was working her rice fields. She was the only information I could find when she was born was 1920. So she would be 100 years old now. And 3 years ago, at 97, she was going out and working her rice fields. So I saw her come home. Then I followed her in, and she looked at me, and she recognized me. And you know how kupuna, if they see family that they never see a long time, the first thing they do is slap them, right?
Yeah.
And that's what she did with me. She slapped me and she gave me a hug. And then she started talking to me about the significance of the Kalinga tattoos. She told me what should be used when and all of these things. And I appreciated that. And, I've been using some of them sometimes. But I want to go back one more time. Take these guys all with me. But they're going to have to carry me because, that. But, sometimes as Hawaiians, as Polynesians, we get real hokano about who we are, what we are, and all of that. We think that tapping started in Polynesia and all of that stuff. Then you see this 90-something-year-old woman tapping along, not saying anything. It makes you realize that you are not just a continuation of all of these traditions that started thousands of years ago. The whisper that you hear in the mountains of your kupuna landed in Hawaii, but that whisper started in countries elsewhere. The sound of the hahau resounding in the valleys landed in Hawaii, but that sound was created thousands of miles away.
Oh, was her style of tattooing and technique the same or similar to Polynesia?
Very, very similar. I mean,
wow.
I can tap like that, and I have. It's amazing. It's amazing. So sometimes we get so hokano and so introspective of who we are that we forget that we are just the last leg of peoples that extended far into other reaches of the world. I went to Taiwan and I helped some a Taiwanese tattooist with some of his stuff. And when I saw what they were doing, when I saw the type of ceremonies they had, I understood that we are part of that. And so it's really important that we don't isolate ourselves and think that we're the only ones, because it's very, very important for us to reach out to other people that we know we come from and that we know we can help. I helping a lot of other people, not because I'm so good. It's because if it wasn't for Paulo helping me, we wouldn't have this today. These guys would not be here. So I owe it to Paulo to continue helping people who want to know, who want to have, to rekindle those traditions because they have them. But yeah, Puskalan is a very special place. Again, I'd really love to go there again. After all of this is over, maybe next year we can. Hopefully she's still with us. And
right.
yeah. But thank you for asking.
So it's been wonderful to see the growth of this cultural practice over the past 30 years. This is a question, I guess, for all three of you. What do you see happening in the next 30, 50 years and the future of kākauhi?
I see these guys, so they're going to answer.
I see our kumus. Got me. How am I?
That's okay, bro.
I think the bigger question might be, what do we see in the next 7 generations? And
yes,
that should be the minimal outlook, I think, for anyone that's interested in tradition. Because I mentioned before, I mean, we're all gonna die, and we can only hope to serve as an appropriate link between now and the generations to come. The path is extremely narrow, and so to alter traditions, or to have different branches of these traditions, those changes will increase tenfold with each generation. If we have issues, I never say that there's issue with any tradition, but there's issues with personalities. You know, I think a lot of this has to come from a selfless standpoint, and it's a constant battle to be able to put yourself in that space to think, to not think from ego, because those type of decisions, whether we know it or not now, will affect, you know, what these traditions look like 7 generations from now. And so, although there is room for growth in certain aspects, growth is, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is extremely small. It should take generations for traditions to quote unquote evolve, but it really shouldn't happen much within a single generation, lest we risk, you know, creating something, mutating something that doesn't even look like what it did, you know, 7 generations before us. So it's, for myself at least, you know, I can say that it'll be a constant putting myself into, consciously every day, putting myself into that space to think if these decisions, be it big or small, hold the weight of the 7 generations before and the 7 generations to come.
You know, I can say that I never wanted to be known as a tattooist. I still don't. But there are people, and I've told this to all of these guys, I said, when somebody tells you you're good, never believe them. Because once your ego takes over, then everything else, the quality of your work, the things that you talk yourself into, saying that, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what my kupuna said I should be doing. Those things become louder. And there are some people nowadays that are tapping that do not have that lineage, do not have that understanding, that have gone out into their own levelanis about who they are.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the hardest thing for us to, as practitioners, to do, is to remain as a student for the rest of my life. I'm still learning from my tools. My tools teach me every single time that I do work. And it's a very seductive thing to be sitting on this side tapping, because people look at you in a different way. People look at you as that mystic kahuna. And I tell people, kahuna is a rank that the community gives you, not that I can give anybody. And as Mao was the only po, Mao Piailu,
Yes.
until he had time to say that I am no longer going to do this. It's the same thing. So these guys got to suffer until I'm out of here, you know, till I've joined my ancestors, because they will forever be my students.
Right.
And that's how it should be.
Keliʻi, anything to add?
Because I was out of the gate first, and Kumu pretty much said, okay, what you're gonna do now? You're going, work. You're gonna do this, whatnot, and I made that commitment to stay within his teachings to do this. And now Kamaliʻi as well, as a kāuhi, both of us as a kāuhi under our master. It's for me to stay as close as I can, because our kumu left his practice to his most recent graduate. And it's for me to stay as close to the two of them with my practice, so that we don't stray any different roads, as what Kamaliʻi was saying earlier. So it's about me being in contact more often, or as often as can, and be in communication, so that we're on the same level. One thing that he did mention earlier is looking 7 generations down the line. If there's a split now, it gets worse with the next generation, and in 7 generations from now, that small sliver will be a mile gap, and we'll have different thoughts or paths of Ike being placed out there. And it's to the utmost importance of this practice. Kumu's worked his tail off. Like, I've been with him for 30 years. Literally, he worked his tail off for all the 30 years that I've known him, plus before that. You know what I mean? So it can't be wasted because of an ego, or because I was going someplace else, or whatnot, or I never made time. It's the importance of being present for one another.
Thank you, Keliʻi. Anything else to share about the practice of kākau from any of you?
Well, kākahikahi kupo e hele I ki ia ala. Po kahi ala wale. E ka ala ololi. Nui na po e hele I ka ala olola. Aka no nae. Ia mako. Puna ia mako ke hele maluna ki ia ala. Ki ala wale. No ka mea ina ale hele no mako I ke ia ala ololi. Ua nalu wale ia ka manao, ka mea kupono, ka mea kupai anaha e pili ana ki ia anu, ki ia hana nei. For those who don't understand go learn. But I think that it is important to realize that if we stray, then it's the entire culture that suffers. So we cannot stray.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing your time with us this afternoon. Very valuable information for our community to learn today about not just this cultural practice, but I think the example that you folks set through the ceremony and protocol that you've instilled into your practice can be used by other practices as well, and other members of our community. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Mahalo nui.
Yeah, we'll continue. No worries. Mahalo.
I'm gonna do a couple of things to close our episode today. Again, thank you to Keone Nunes, Kamaliʻi, and Keliʻi for sharing some invaluable information about things that can inspire our people to do better and get involved in whatever they'd like to do to be productive and be positive in their community. Thank you, gentlemen. We want to invite everyone to join our other programs on Kanaiokana, including Le'a Nui Nui, Aloha Rising, Kua Kanaka, Aikole, and of course our show every Friday at 2 p.m. Also, we have 2 brand new shows through Ahakane. It's called Aha Opio for our teens and Aha Keiki for our little ones. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Ahakane and at Kanaiokana. Mahalo nui to our sponsors for making Huewai Ola possible. Besides Ahakane and Kanaiokana, also Hawaii Tourism through the Kukulu Ola program, Papa Ola Lokahi, Consuelo Foundation. Please, all you gentlemen out there, besides being safe and masking up, there are resources during this pandemic. Remember that you're not alone. There's help for you out there if you do need. You just got to reach out. We have a couple of lists of resources for you. Don't be afraid to make a call or email or reach out to someone for help. We also have Hawaii job fairs if you're ready to get back to work. Kohala Center is hiring, and Child Care Connection Hawaii is also available to help your ohana as needed. We have resources for veterans, our kupuna, and for situations dealing with specifically this COVID-19 and our lockdowns. Otherwise, what a great episode. Thank you for joining us. And before we do the survey thing, remember to vote. It's too late to mail, so don't go to the mailbox. If you vote today, take it to the voting boxes themselves to be collected on Saturday. And your voice matters in the way of census as well. Complete those, participate, and be heard to represent our entire Hawaiian community. Otherwise, take a short survey to help us get better every week here at Huewai Ola. Thank you so much for joining us. We're here every 2 p.m. on our Facebook or website, also Kanaiokana's Facebook and website. And we've had 14 great episodes, many more to come. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week at 2 p.m. Mahalo nui and aloha.